Assalamu alaikum. Hi, how are you? I hope you will be fine and doing well. Dear student and viewers, today we discuss the data collection method, step 5, principles of wording. As you know that the research process for the basic and applied research consists of 11 steps, but our focus on step 7 data collection method of the research process. As you know that the data collection methods have main three types of data collection methods: observation, questionnaires, and interviews. But today, for the questionnaire design, which principles are most important? The principle of wording, principle of measurement, and principle of journal getup. But today, we discuss the principle of wording. So what is the principle of wording? The principle of wording refer to the such factor as appropriate of the contents of the questions and how the questions are awarded and the level of sophistication of the language used by the researcher, the type and form of the questions asked by the researcher to the respondent. The sequence of the question is the most important, which sequence is important for the respondent as well for the researcher to getting the personal information. The personal data sought from the respondent, from the those are filling your questionnaires, those are responding on your questionnaires. But researcher focus is to getting a true and sound information from their respondent. As you know that each part of a principle of wording, the steps of principle of wording is the most important. Firstly, we want to discuss the content of the questions. What types of contents must be used by the researcher? The nature of the variable tagged subjective feeling and objective facts will determine what kind of question will be asked and what types of question will be important during collection of data, and you can be include those types of questions on nature of your research in the questions in the questionnaires. The second important thing is the language. The language of the questionnaire should approximate the level of understanding of the respondent. The choice of the word would depend on their educational level, the uses of terms and idioms in the culture, and the frames of reference of the respondent. All things are most important for perspective of the language. If the researcher used a proper and understandable language, as the respondent easily understand the language, the researcher can get a true and sound data, and they helpful for a questionnaires as well as for when you are using a proper wording for designing the questionnaires. The next important steps in the part of the principle of wording: type and form of questionnaires. The types and the form of the questionnaires refer to whether the question will be open-ended or closed. Form refer to positively and negatively worded questions. Open-ended versus close-ended, and positive and negative worded questions, double-barreled questions, ambiguous questions, recall dependent questions, leading questions, loaded questions, and social desirability based question, and length of the question is. All things are most important in the questionnaires. But firstly, the open-ended versus close-ended questions allow the respondent to answer them in any way they choose. And the positive and the negative questions, instead of phrasing all questions positively, it is advisable to include some negatively worded questions, as well as the tendency in respondent to mechanically circle the points toward one end of the scale minimize. For example, let's say that a set of the 6 questions is used to tap the variable perceived success on a 5-point Likert scale, with 1 being very low, 5 is being very high on the scale. Double-barreled questions. The double-barreled question is referred to the question that lends itself the different possible responses to the respondent they give the answer in different aspect is called a double-barreled questions. When we are talking about the ambiguous questions, even the questions that are not double-barreled might be ambiguous worded, and respondent may not be sure what the exactly they have the meaning. That is called ambiguous questions. Recall dependent questionnaires. These types of questions might require the respondent to recall the experience from the past that are they have experienced in the past and in the past periods, and recall their memory and use some information during providing the informations. The leading questionnaires should not be phrased in such a way they lead the respondent to give a respondent the researcher would like or want them to give. Example of such as questions: don't you think that in these days of escalating the cost of living, employees should be given a good pay raises? These types of questions is called a leading questions. And loaded questions. Another types of bias in questions occurs when they are phrased in emotionally charged manner. When the questions are charged in emotionally words, it is called a loaded questions. Social desirability based questions, basically the question should not be worded such they socially desirable responses. For instance, questions such as, do you think that older people should be laid off? Would no, mainly because the question is based on the social desire, social acceptance, like that. The length of the questions also be most important. Finally, simple and short questions are preferable to the long ones. As rule of thumb, questions statement in the questionnaire should not exceed 20 words. I think the 20 words in the phrase in the sentence is understandable for the respondent. These all types and form of questions help the respondent to understanding your questionnaires. Sequence of the questions. The sequence of the questions in the questionnaire should be such that respondent is led from question from general nature to the specific, like that they adopt a funnel approach. First, the researcher put those types of questions in the questionnaire, they have the general aspect, and then at the ending of the questionnaires be focused, they have contains a specific and the more difficult questions. And personal information, the most important aspect of the questionnaires, and the principle of wording, the classification data also known as the personal information or demographic question. Such information as age, educational level, marital status, income level, unless absolutely necessary, it is best not ask for the name of the respondent. You can give the option to the respondent, may they have mentioned their name or not. You cannot. You also they have the option to the respondent. You can hidden the name, the personal information of the respondent. But it is important aspect of principle of wording during your collection of data, during your design your questionnaires. Thank you for watching today videos, today lecture. I hope you will be understand our today lecture. Stay blessed. Inshallah, we will discuss in the next steps in the next video. Take care. Allah Hafiz.